The word arhat, referring to the culmination of one who's followed the Shravaka path, or pratyeka, but Shravaka. The word literally means a foe destroyer, one who's conquered his enemies. That's what it means. Arhat, darjomba. And what are the enemies? Mental afflictions, klesha. And everything that flows from them, the karma that flows from mental afflictions, the misery that flows from karma. And so an arhat is one who has identified his true enemies, his or her, gender neutral, who has identified his own enemies, his true enemies, and completely annihilated them and all their progeny. Pretty harsh, really. I mean, it's killed them all. And so that they will never crop up. It's like wiping out a whole species. The passenger pigeons will never come back, right? They were wiped out completely. No eggs. No nothing. I don't think we even have DNA. Never come back. That's a tragedy. It's no tragedy, though, when all the mental afflictions are wiped out, with no progeny, with no eggs, no vasanas, no mental imprints, no seeds. They're all wiped out. It's a monumental victory, that of an arhat. But then we have this term jina. Jina, it's a synonym of Buddha. Jina is a conqueror, one who is victorious, and this is beyond that of an arhat. An arhat has annihilated, conquered, vanquished all the afflictive obscurations, which are simply mental afflictions. Whereas a jina, a conqueror, a victorious one, has overcome, annihilated, extinguished, without any possibility of ever returning, not only all of the afflictive obscurations, but also the cognitive obscurations. And the cognitive obscurations are the obscurations that stand between an arhat and a Buddha. Stand between an 8th stage Arya Bodhisattva and a Buddha. It's the final line of defense that prevents us from fully realizing, manifesting our own Buddha nature, Rikpa, primordial consciousness, cognitive obscurations. And Jina has entirely eliminated all of them, so they can never come back. So this is a path to such total victory. And although this word gives, I think, all of us the creeps, I'm going to use it anyway, because this is the real meaning. Holy war. Holy war. How many times has that word been used in history? Going back to the Old Testament or the Jewish Bible, going back to religions in the East and the West. It's all over the place. But of course, it's not only religious people who are waging war. People wage war for the same old power, money, wealth, ego, and so forth. And very, very often throughout history, it's often justified as God is on our side. And the enemy, of course, is externalized as other people. Right? That's not a holy war, that's a sham. Whether you call it a jihad, you call it a crusade, you call it a holy war, you call it God on our side, it's all just expression of miserable, miserable, miserable delusion. This is a holy war. This is a holy war. Our only enemies are mental afflictions. Our only enemies are the obscurations of our own mind. So I've been very harsh on occasion of condemning materialism and condemning absurd misrepresentations of Buddhism, condemning closed-mindedness and so forth. I try to take a clean shot though, because I bring out bazookas, but I try to take a clean shot. And that is target the delusion, what is said, what is asserted, and not the asserter. Because people change their beliefs. People say one thing and then they say another. So, no collateral damage. Go ahead and use bullshit, whatever you like, but no collateral damage. Don't harm anybody because they can always be freed. They have Buddha nature. Delusion, silly statements like, not having any desire for anything to change. That's simply a delusion. But the person who affirmed that, he could have another view tomorrow. He can say, oh, what a silly thing I said. Gosh, I wish I hadn't said it. So if you blow that person away, then he has no chance to change his mind. Right? And that goes for the materialists and atheists and so forth, and fundamentalists and dog-minded, belligerent people all over the place. So this is a holy war. There's no collateral damage. There's no downside. No one suffers. Isn't that wonderful? A holy war in which no one suffers. Only upside. It's only upside, right? That's a very rare war. But these are the words Buddha used. This isn't some militant, right-winger coming out and trying to militarize Buddhism. The Buddha called them arhats. The Buddha called them jinas. It's already there. And if you look at Shantideva, the great bodhisattva, military analogies run all through this text of the Guide to the Bodhisattva Way of Life. It's really there. It's really full. Let alone going into, Vajrayana. If you look at Yamantaka recently, he doesn't look like he's very peaceful. It doesn't look like he would take your mental afflictions out for tea and have a cordial conversation. Why don't we work this out? I'm sure we can work out a deal where you feel comfortable with me, and I feel comfortable with you. And don't mind my 32 arms, he says. And all the weapons and every single one. I'm really quite nice. Oh, you would not want to meet. Your mental afflictions would not want to meet Yamantaka in a dark alley. So when we hear this, and we've been hearing this for 2,500 years, this is old terminology, it's very easy. There's an enormous temptation, as far as I can tell. Many Buddhists succumb to this temptation. Say, okay, liberation, okay, enlightenment, let's go for it. Let's bring out the elite troops. Let's bring out our best. So what's for the Shravakayana? What's the elite troops? The elite troops, right? Vipassana. Vipassana. That's your cutting edge. That's the best you've got. Vipassana, right? Bring out the Vipassana. Never mind ethics. Yeah, okay. Follow the 5 precepts, And Shamatha, I think we can probably do with momentary. That'll be enough. Bring out the elite troops. Vipassana, Vipassana, Vipassana. And so you bring out the elite troops. You know what happens? I can tell you what happens. It's like Second World War. You bring out your elite troops, and there are the mental victims. They got machine guns, and they just blow you down. They cut you down like grass with coarse conceptualization. The coarse conceptualization. Bring out your Vipassana. You got dead corpses of Vipassana all over the place. And if you just used up your elite troops, too bad. You didn't think that maybe you should wipe out the machine gunners before you brought in your elite troops. Go to Mahayana. Oh, bring in meditation and emptiness. That's really deep. Go to Vajrayana. Bring in Zen. Bring in Zen. Bring in Dogen, this majestic, great master Dogen. Bring in just sitting. Down go the Zen meditators. Go to Vajrayana. Bring in the 6 dharmas of Naropa. That's the elite troops. Bring in Dzogchen, bring in Mahamudra, bring in Guhya Samaja, bring in Kalachakra, bring in Vajrayogini, bring in the elite troops, bring in the 3 retreat. You get corpses all over the place. As soon as the retreat's over, then all these dead corpses. And it's the same old stupid machine gunners that's wiping out all your elite troops, and it's just the same old obsessive compulsive delusional disorder. Like, you hadn't thought maybe you should wipe out the machine gunner before you bring your elite troops in? This is bad strategy. You'll make these little spikes, you'll cut through the barbed wire, you'll cut through, and then you just get more machine gunners, and they just wipe you out again. You have your Satori, you have your this, you have your that. You have your spike, you have your breakthrough, you have your gun, and more corpses all over the place. So I think it's time to wipe out the machine gunners. Before you bring in the elite troops, bring in the grunts. The grunt is shamatha. Grunt, 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 grunt. It's poor old shamatha. The shamatha are the pawns on the board. It's just shamatha. But shamatha wipes out the machine gunners of ideation, of obsessive, compulsive, delusion ideation. Shamatha wipes them out. Then bring in the elite. They don't get mowed down. How's that for a start? I'm really nice. Take my word for it. Kill them all. That's my motto. Wipe them all out with no survivors. All mental afflictions, but no collateral damage. Never harm another sentient being. No sentient beings. They're all savable. Every single one. So, in terms of military analogy, the first major phase, central phase of Dzogchen practice, tek chut. Look at the terminology. Tek is something gnarly, hard, gritty, hard to get through, impermeable. And chut means it's William Wallace's big sword, cutting through. It's not one of those little wimpy, would you like some snails with your death? Would you like some escargot? You know. I love the straightforwardness of the Scots. We're not playing around here. I'm just going to cut off your head. And you'll get no escargot. Because you won't have a head. Tek chut, you're cutting through. You're cutting through something that's hard and gnarly, and that is reification. Reification of your own mind, of your own identity. You're cutting through conventional reality. Cutting through to a primordial reality that utterly transcends all conceptual frameworks. You're cutting through to primordial freedom, freedom that was already there. You're cutting through to your heritage, your birthright. You are Sangiki Rik, you're of the family of the Buddhas, so take your own birthright. It's not something you may have one day, you already have it, you haven't found it yet. So we come back to our practice, bearing in mind this notion of cutting through, that's the translation. Good translation of tek chut, cutting through to the original purity of your own pristine awareness, which is nothing other than Dhammakaya. But let's not bring in the elite troops just yet, right? Let's go back to the grunts to make sure that we wipe out those machine gun nests of vitarka, of vikalpa, obsessive ideation. Because whether you're a Tummo practitioner, stage of completion, Dzogchen, Mahamudra, Vipassana, and so forth, if you haven't wiped out the machine gun nest of Vikalpa, they will wipe you out. It will be a war of attrition. You'll do your 3 retreat, your 6 retreat, you'll go off to Burma for 10 years, and if you have not wiped out that, they're going to mow you down. They're so persistent, they will wear you out, you know. And so we have to cut through simple ideation, let alone the big one, let alone finally taking in the king in the center of the castle. We have to cut through. And so we come back to this simple grunt practice, shamatha. But really, the cutting edge of that is this practice right here, which Maitripa calls the pinnacle, the ultimate, the final. This is kind of like bringing in the heavies within the domain of shamatha. And that is the shamatha of non-conceptualization, where we're not simply allowing the ideation to die away a natural death as you gradually settle your mind in its natural state. Just watching them all die of old age, basically. Or die of malnutrition, better. I mean, that's kind of a siege approach. You know, surround the castle and just let them all starve to death. Isn't this nice terminology? I'm really cutting off heads, starving to death, wiping them out, you know. Like, okay, here we are. This is real Buddhism. This is not the namby-pamby Buddhism, making friends with your mental afflictions. This is not psychotherapy. This is war. Okay. Just want to make clear distinction. So we're coming to this practice that Penchen Rinpoche says, whatever thought comes up, cut it off immediately. It's violent terminology. But again, never against any sentient being. That's absolutely a crucial point. The first point is never directed to a sentient being. No, we're just directing to this obsessive thoughts coming up. Cut them off. Well, let's bring some insight to this. It's always good to enrich one's shamatha with insights when they're available and they're relevant. So I would suggest now's the time to attend very closely. This is really useful. It goes right from the Dzogchen tradition. We're going to go into the practice. It will be a non-guided practice, so I'm going to front load it. Spend a bit of time, as much time as you need, settling body, speech, and mind, calming, discursive, so at least the landscape is less cluttered. right? Less cluttered by obsessive ideation, right? A little bit of peace and quiet. You thin them out a little bit with mindfulness of breathing. And then, as you simply rest there in awareness, inverting awareness right in upon itself, which is kind of like the mouth from which all the thoughts and desires and mental afflictions and so forth emerge. It can happen that as you're very attentive there, right there at the aperture of the mind, it's possible that some expression of a mental affliction of attachment, craving, will arise. The mental affliction. Where there's a reification, by definition, when this mental affliction arises, it entails a reification of the object of desire. And if it's something I don't have yet, I crave it, thinking that will make me happy, whatever that is, an abstraction, a person, a thing, place, whatever. That will make me happy. That's the source of my well-being, and I've reified it. And I'm saying, that will make me happy. I want it. I'm craving for it. Or I've already got it, and now I've got to hold on to this because this is the source of my happiness. I'm reifying it and saying, this is my source of my happiness. With a lot of refractory period involved where I'm filtering out the negative and enhancing, accentuating, exaggerating the positive. Okay? And so such thoughts might arise. It can happen, right? Thoughts of attachment, impulses of this mental affliction of attachment can arise. If you observe the manifest nature of the mental affliction of attachment as it comes up, you'll find that you're entangled, you'll get caught up in the storyline. What is it you crave? Oh, I wish I had a new car. I wish I had, and then, you have a story. It has a referent. So the manifest nature of a mental affliction of craving is you're craving something, and then you tell what you're craving. Okay, that's the whole story, right? But the essential nature is cutting through the story, cutting to the bare bones, the nucleus of the mental affliction of craving, or if you have it already, attachment. So these two are hyphenated. You're cutting through the nucleus of it, cutting through the story, cutting through the specific manifestation, the details, to its core. And now, here's a very interesting hypothesis. If you see this mental affliction of arising, you're right there, and you're seeing the mental affliction of craving attachment arising, look to its core and see if you observe the following. Pleasure. Or call it bliss. It's the same word. Priti. Sanskrit. Pleasure, enjoyment. And that is, if I want something, let's say, okay, just because I like to be tangible, okay, flower. This is not my flower, it's just there, so, but boy, if I could have that flower. So I just want it simple, right? So here's my object of craving that it doesn't belong to me, but maybe it could, right? And I'm thinking that gorgeous flower there, if I could own that flower, if I could hold it to my heart, if it could be mine, that would make me so happy. I'd have the flower of my life, And there's some pleasure in that, right? Just fill in the empty space, whatever you like. I'm just using these as a symbol. But that would make me so happy. If I could have that, I could be more famous. I could be wealthier. I could have more people love me, respect me. I could be handsomer. I could be younger. I could blah, blah, blah. No, there's a flower. There's some happiness in that. Oh, I could be happy. I want it. Or I get the flower, the reputation, whatever, but the flower. This is my symbol. Oh, and I'm okay. I'm happy. Stay away. I'm happy. Detachment has happiness in it. Now imagine that somebody is just taking my flower. Lim, you can have the flower. Oh, I hate you for taking my flower. So now she's got my flower. You saw how she ripped it right from my hand. And so now I'm so upset. Anger, resentment, hostility, hatred, malevolence, and so forth. Oh, I can't stand that. Awful woman, Lim, just ripped it from my hand. She took the flower of my life. And imagine this, again, I'm making this very silly because no collateral damage, right? But imagine it's real. That was silly, this is silly. That she's my enemy, of course not. But actual anger is arising. I've got to get back. I hate this. This is awful, terrible, intolerable. Can't stand it. There's something very sharp about that. The quality of awareness, when you cut through I'm upset with her, or I'm upset she took my flower, and so forth. When you cut through the manifest nature, cut through the essential nature, when anger is blazing, I'm enraged, I'm engulfed, I'm inflamed with anger, hatred, malevolence, malice. So it's bright, it's sharp, it burns, it's acute, it's luminosity. Look into attachment, its essential nature, you're going to find bliss. Look into anger, its essential nature. You're going to find it's like a blowtorch. Very bright, luminous, intense. You don't have anything such thing as kind of mellow, soft, gentle anger. Right? That's intense. And then we go to delusion. Delusional thoughts coming up. Just confusion, dull. We all know what that is, right? And we can be deluded, we get confused, bewildered, ignorant, dopey, idiotic, etc. We have that family there. And that can arise. It can happen as a result of jet lag. It can happen as a result of, various things. Brain damage and so forth, but it just happens in daily life, of course, where we just slip into a state where, for a while, one's stupid. I noticed that. On occasion, I've noticed, like, if I have very little sleep and I've been working hard, maybe too much, then I'll notice sometimes, my mind now is relatively stupid. I'll recognize it. I can see I tried to do something and my mind wasn't up to it. Like I tried to lift 25 pounds and my mind couldn't do it. It's like, 25 pounds, like that. So with very clear discerning intelligence, I can say, my mind's stupid right now. Better not try to use it. It won't serve me well. Right now my mind's stupid. Right? My mind's dull. Don't try to use it. Better just give it some milk and go to bed. So that's the manifest. We're deluded about this, we're so forth. Manifest, how does it feel and so forth. But when you cut right to its nucleus, the essential nature of stupor, delusion, confusion, bewilderment, cut right through to it. And since in our ordinary, normal, day-to-day modes of knowing, when we know something clearly, sharply, whether as a poet, as a philosopher, a gardener, a scientist, and so forth, whatever our field is, where we really know something, we understand something, where we say, I've got it, I got it. Or, now I get it. It's always embedded in concepts. Scientific, philosophical, and so forth and so on. It's embedded in concepts. We know things by way of concepts. I know you, I recognize, now I get it. We find it very easy to articulate because we've already conceptualized it, and our knowing is embedded in concept, right? But when we slip into stupor, into this whole moha mode, and you cut right through to its nucleus, you'll find there, in the very essence of delusion, bewilderment, stupor, and so forth, non-conceptuality. Non-conceptuality. So I found when I first encountered that, I thought, that is just brilliant. That these three mental afflictions, when you cut through their manifest nature with all the ideation and what they're about and what they're reifying, you cut through that. This is course level of cutting through. This is kindergarten level of cutting through. Not cutting through to Rigpa yet, but we're cutting through to the three qualities of the substrate consciousness when it's clearly manifest. Bliss, luminosity, and non-conceptuality. Right? And in so doing, we detoxify them. That is, if I'm attached to, a glass of water, I've reified it, and so forth and so on. There's, again, now it's a symbol, my flower's gone. If I go to the glass of water, then if I'm craving this or attached to this, my glass of water, this is the best glass of water, and so forth, then this is afflictive, this is toxic. It's just ready to burst into anger if somebody takes it from me. And it makes me anxious that I'm going to lose it, because I will, and so forth. So it's all bound up in affliction, in anxiety, in potential suffering. And it feels good because I got my water, but it's a very trembling type of feeling good. Because how long can I hold on to it? When will it be gone? Will somebody foul it? Will somebody take it away? Will it become boring? maybe I won't love it anymore, because I find it's just water, and then I'll be so disappointed that the water didn't live up to my expectations. I thought this was my soulmate, but it's just a glass of water. When you look at its manifest nature, it's toxic. And that's why it's called one of the three poisons. It poisons the mind. Whereas when we cut through it, and as the attachment is arising, we look right through to its nucleus and we identify the enjoyment, the bliss, the joy. That's not toxic. Joy is not toxic. Right? Joy is not toxic. It's one of the qualities of substrate consciousness. No problem. And likewise anger. I'm angry at anything, anyone, any place, anything, any idea. Angry at materialism, what have you. And when the anger is there, we see if one is angry at reifying, whether an ideology, a person, an institution, place, and so forth and so on, that's afflictive. It disturbs the mind, it disrupts the mind, right? And we cut through it to that brightness, that sharpness, that intensity. We detoxify it. We detoxify it. Because intensity, luminosity is not toxic, it's not a poison, it does not afflict. It does not afflict, right? And of course, in cutting through, then the reification is vanished. Because it's not angry at this or craving for that. We've just gone right into its nature. So it's not explicitly reifying anything, it's just sheer luminosity, intensity. And likewise, there's nothing toxic about non-conceptuality. Otherwise, the Buddha's mind would be infinitely toxic. Because the Buddha's mind is non-conceptual, right? The direct realization of emptiness is non-conceptual. The direct realization of Rigpa is non-conceptual. So if non-conceptual were a problem, then those would be all big problems. But of course, they are the liberation. But here's the critical point, and then I'll stop. And that is that the non-conceptuality, the non-conceptual awareness has to be imbued with cognizance. If it's not, then it's simply unknowing. We're back to avidya. Avidya. And when the avidya is shrouded in non-conceptuality, then it very easily turns into delusion. In the first moment of not knowing the dream, in the second moment you misapprehend the dream as something that it's not, namely objective reality. So here's the strategy, and that it is a strategy. This is what I find so brilliant about the Buddha Dharma in general. It's not just saying suffering is bad, evil is bad, let's overcome it, bring in the elite troops. But it's saying, yeah, suffering is bad, the sources of suffering are bad, but we have to be smart here. We need to have a strategy. Don't bring in the elite troops at the beginning. They're to cut the king's head off. They're there to do the final work of total victory. But bring in your first troops, second troops, the first wave, the second wave. Bring in strategy. Bring in military strategy. And this is what the great conqueror taught. It's ethics, samadhi, and wisdom. It's the six perfections, starting with generosity. It's shamatha, vipassana, tekchut, and turtgel, padmasambhava. That's strategy. And you win one battle. You win the battle of shamatha, overcoming vikalpa, overcoming obsessive ideation. Good. It's going to be easier from now, because you won't be wiped out by them anymore, because you've actually conquered, And then you move into Vipassana territory, and you conquer the delusion of reification, including the reification of yourself as a sentient being, the reification of your mind as being intrinsically delusional. Conquer that, eradicate it, annihilate it. When those two are down, it's a cakewalk, we say in American English, then enjoy your day. Because now just receive the pointing out instructions, be introduced to the view of Dzogchen. Then you can cut through the conventional mind, cut through the substrate to Rigpa. And you'll be able to remain there. That's the whole point. Once you've cut through the Rigpa, you've got a really easy job. Don't do anything, right? Rest in Rigpa. And then you may augment that, most people do, with the turtgel. But the turtgel's, it's watching a cinema. It's watching a movie of the spontaneously arising appearances, images, archetypal forms arising from your Buddha nature. Strategy. Everything is strategy. Okay? 10 hut. Let's have a session.